It is 7 o'clock, and in the absence of a president of council, I'd like to call the meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, council, is there any nominations for President Pro Tem?
Mayor?
Mr. Wallenczak.
Yes, Mayor. At this time, I'd like to nominate Mr. or Councilman Horniak to be our President of Council for the evening.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, is there any objections? Hearing none, Mr. Horniak, the chair is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. If it's okay with council, I'll kind of run the meeting from here. Unless anybody feels strongly that I need to move over, we'll go ahead and take it from here. First order of business, Ms. Rossing, if you would take a roll of council, please.
Mr. Davish?
Here.
Mr. Drake?
Here.
Mr. Horniak?
Here.
Mrs. Paula?
Here.
Mr. Reeves?
Here.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Here.
Mr. Zale?
Thank you, council. Please note that Council President Tim Zale is not present at the meeting today. I'd seek a motion to permit the absence.
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move to excuse Mr. Tim Zale from tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
Second.
Second by Mr. Drake. Any objection? Mr. Zale is excused from the meeting. With that, we're going to change the order of the meeting just a little bit tonight because we've got, I'll say, two different crowds of people here for two different items today. So we're going to kind of bring one to the front and kind of move that meeting forward. So with that, I'll move to the mayor for the mayor's report for some appointments and personnel discussions. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. And council, you have been sent the correspondence of several appointments tonight, and I have them before me and you have them before you. And I'm going to start with the Department of Building and Zoning. And I'm going to ask council's concurrence in the appointment of Mr. Charles Sutphin to the position of Building and Zoning Inspector. And it will be a startup date of December 11th, 2023. And let's see, be placed in step 6 of pay range position of Building Inspector at an hourly rate of $40.66 an hour, which is an annual rate of $84,572.80. So I would ask council's concurrence once again to Mr. Charles Sutphin to the position of Zoning Inspector, effective December 11th, 2023.
Thank you, Mayor. Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move to concur with the mayor of the appointment of Mr. Charles Suffin as the position of Building and Zoning Inspector effective December 11th, 2023.
Okay, concurrence by Mr. Davish. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Pauloff. Any objections, council? None. Appointment made.
Okay, thank you, council. And Charles Sutphin is here. You want to say anything? We usually require you to speak for about 20 minutes or so. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Very good. I will now move on to the next one, and now this is from the fire department. And I'm going to start with asking council's concurrence of Robert Briggs of 5246 Calvin Avenue, Sylvania, Ohio. And Mr. Briggs, we placed at the position of volunteer part-time or paid on call fire position. And it is an hourly rate of 21.3229 and rate of for shift duty and the rate of 281085 for general alarms. The position will have a startup date of November 28th, which is tomorrow. And I would ask council's concurrence in the appointment, once again, of Mr. Robert Briggs.
Thank you, Mayor. Council.
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff.
I move to concur with the mayor's appointment of Robert Briggs to part-time volunteer fire department starting November 28th, 2023.
Thank you, Ms. Polliff. Concur by Ms. Polliff. Do I have a
Second.
second? Second by Mr. Wallenczak. Council, any issues or objections to the appointment? Hearing none, the appointment is made. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next, I will go to the same position and ask council's concurrence of Craig Duncan of 1863 Plimpton Circle, Oregon, Ohio. Once again, it's 21-3229 for shift duty, and general alarms 28-1085, and the position is effective November 28th, tomorrow also. And I'd ask council's concurrence in the appointment, once again, of Craig Duncan to aid on call fire position.
Thank you, Mayor. Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Polliff.
I move to concur with the mayor's appointment of Craig Duncan to part-time volunteer fireman in the fire department starting November 28th, 2023.
Thank you, Ms. Polliff.
Second.
We have a concurrence from Ms. Polliff, second by Mr. Wallenczak. Council, any objections? Hearing none, the appointment is made. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And next, ask for council's concurrence to the appointment of Stacy Hartwig, 5518 Seaman Road, to be firefighter 2, paramedic. It is step 1, an hourly rate of $26,6967 and a yearly salary of $69,411.42. Startup date will be also November 28th, 2023, tomorrow. And once again, ask council's concurrence in the appointment of Stacy Hartwig, firefighter 2, paramedic, step 1, Oregon Fire Department.
Thank you, Mayor. Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move to concur with the mayor to appoint Stacy Hartwick as a firefighter 2, a paramedic, effective start date of November 28, 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Mr. Drake. So we have concurrence from Mr. Davish, second by Mr. Drake. Council, any objections?
No, Stacy's here. I know, is any others want to get up and please give us your 20-minute presentation?
I just want to thank you for the opportunity, and I take this appointment very seriously, so thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you to each of the members and welcome aboard. Mayor, any others for this point?
I might as well go along with a couple of these other ones, and that Marty Zeller has announced his retirement resignation, and that would be effective January 15th, 2024. So I'd ask council's concurrence in granting Marty Zeller, streets supervisor, his wishes in his retirement. And once again, I ask council's concurrence in that acceptance.
Thank you, Mayor. Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move to concur with the mayor of the retirement of Martin Zeller, effective January 15th of 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
So we have concurrence from Mr. Davish, second by Mrs. Polliff. Council, any objections? Hearing none, the retirement is accepted, so I guess we'll let Mr. Zeller actually retire. Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
So, and this last one, I'm gonna ask council to go wait on the line on this one and accept the appointments of Steve Horniak to the position of Oregon Growth Corporation with the term from 12/1/23 to 12/31/27.
Okay, Council,
Mr. President,
Mr.
I
Davish.
move to concur with the mayor of your appointment to the Oregon Growth Corporation, effective 12/1/23.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Davish, second by Mrs. Polliff. Council, any objections? Hearing none, the appointment is made. Mr. Mayor, any other announcements or appointments?
I'll just do the report.
Regular
here,
report?
So we
Please.
are good to go. You guys.
All right, hearing that,
Out for this.
I was going to say
exciting
thank
meeting.
you all for coming out. Those that want to leave after the appointments,
Mm.
welcome to the teams. Congratulations to those retiring. Have a great evening all.
Take care, John. He's the best.
All right, thank you. We'll continue on with the meeting. We've got one order of business before we'll get to the public hearing tonight. Council, we do have to have the approval of the minutes from the November 13th, 2023 regular council meeting and the November 20th, 2023 committee of the whole meeting. I'll seek a motion for acceptance of those.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves,
thank you, Mr. President. I move to approve the minutes from the November 13th of 2023 regular council meeting and the November 20th, 2023 committee of the whole as presented.
thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. So we have a motion by Mr. Reeves, second by Mr. Davish. Council, any objections? Hearing none, the minutes are accepted. All right, first action item on the agenda for this evening is we have a public hearing scheduled for an application of SUE. I'll go ahead and read through the entire public hearing item, then we'll open the public hearing item. So we will open the public hearing at 7:13 according to my watch. This is for an application of SUE 18023 for a special use exception in an R2 medium residential district for the purpose of housing 30 bantam chickens on the property described as parcels 44-73431 and 44-73427, located at 2618 Bleecker Street, Oregon, Ohio 43616. The applicant name is Amparo Piscina Collins. And with that, we'll proceed to, is there anybody here tonight to speak in favor of the SUE? None? Is there anybody here to speak against the proposed SUE? Please, that's what it's here for. We'll ask you to step to the podium, say your name and your address.
My name's Kathleen Fox. I live at 2605 Bleecker Street, across the street, catty corner from where they currently have the roosters. I'm not sure that the roosters are gone. I just heard them the other day. I know they had 30 days to get rid of them. I'm against the chickens. I've lived across from chickens before when I lived in the country. The stench is terrible, and I don't think they belong in the city. That's my opinion. Nothing against whoever's applying for them or against chickens or roosters, but I don't believe they belong in my neighborhood.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you, Mrs. Fox.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President.
Yes, Mayor.
I've been made aware that as of yesterday, the last rooster is no longer is there. Mr. Schrake, did you inspect that or can you verify that?
Yes, the inspector went out today, this afternoon, or this morning, sorry, and confirmed that in the time that he was there, there were no roosters. But last week, when he went to put up the sign, he could clearly hear that the roosters were crowing. So he spoke with the occupant, and they indicated that they only had one remaining and were unable to catch it. But he recommended that they do take care of that before today's hearing. which appears to have been done.
And, Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I was at that, as a member of the planning commission there when this came up, and make you aware that there were many neighbors there, and the roosters was the biggest complaint that most of them had on, and the permit, the SUE for the existing chickens is for a 6-month period, which is about 4 months and 3 weeks. It would expire, and then there would be no chickens there. And I believe the sentiment of most of the neighbors, I mean, I can't remember if you were there. Yeah, we were all there. And so you guys had expressed that most of your concerns were with the roosters. And what's
Yeah,
that?
I was
Forward.
going to say, we can continue with the public's speech through that. We'll come back for full presentation of detail and review from the planning commission for discussion on that at that point. If you're
Okay,
comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would ask, is there anybody else here to speak against? Again, I'll ask you to come to the podium, state your name and your address, please.
My name is Megan Goings. I live at 2622 Bleecker. We are actually right next to them. So last week we still heard the roosters, but we haven't heard them. So I'm assuming they are gone, hopefully. But we have been noticing they've been fighting back there, the chickens, very noisy. And now we're getting a whole bunch of feathers on our side of our yard. So it's just very annoying. Too close to have that many chickens.
Okay. Any additional comment?
No, it's just like I said, it got worse. They're fighting now, and it's just, I don't think it should be in, or I've lived in Oregon my whole life. If I wanted that, I would be in the country. Thank
Fair
you.
enough. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, is there anybody else here to speak against the SUE? With that out there, Mr. Schrick, I'll turn to you if you would give us kind of high level of process thus far and through the planning commission.
Yes, so the public hearing was held on October 17th by the Oregon Planning Commission, which voted 3 yeas and 1 nay to recommend the application. The issue at hand was this was based on a complaint. Unfortunately, the 30 Bantam chickens were already in place at the time of the hearing. And so the Plan Commission spoke with those that were in the room that were in favor or opposition. And there was a mixed group of people. Some were in favor of the chickens. None were in favor of the roosters. And so the Plan Commission put a stipulation that the roosters had to be removed within 30 days of the Plan Commission decision, which has since passed November 17th. And she would have 6 months from the decision of the Plan Commission to remove the remaining 30 chickens, which was her plan to relocate to a larger parcel, another property that would be more in a rural or agriculture zone rather than an R2 zone.
Okay, very good. Mr. Mayor, anything to add to that from the planning commission?
No, but this new, at the time of the planning commission, the people that were there, and you folks were there, seemed to be content with that, but it obviously has changed.
I don't remember us really having a discussion about the chickens because the roosters were there.
Yeah.
And they were told we couldn't have them both together.
No, I understand. I do recall, because I,
What we were
Yeah.
at that time. I could have been wrong.
We were, and because we try to get the information at the time, but you're certainly entitled to come up and say, that's why we have that 30 to 45 days that go before it comes before city council. So that's so that you have that time to digest what you heard at the planning commission. And if you find that it is annoying, you certainly can express that. But I'm saying at that particular time, that's why I think it passed, because there was a strong dislike for the roosters. It was, and the people were very compassionate to say, we'll grant the 30 days, because they were animal lovers, I believe, and they wanted to see that. But we have never granted that many chickens in an area. 6 was traditionally, unless it was out farther and made more sense. So that's why we probably wouldn't have passed that had you expressed more discontent for it at the time, which appears it's gotten worse. So that's why it passed. And had we heard that this type of dialogue then, it probably would have failed there at the planning commission at that time.
Fair enough. Council members, any comments, questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Drake?
I know I talked to at least 100 people. Four of them have either been farmers or raised chickens, whether it be down by Finley, out in the north end. And when I asked them their opinion, I talked to a lot of people in your neighborhood. A lot of them didn't want to come here and speak out against, because I know how the neighbor thing can go. You'll fight with them forever, so it's not worth it. And I never use names of who I talked to, but all I'm going to tell you is, out of the 100 people, it was 106 people. Later on, hopefully sooner than later, to only have 4 or 6. A lot of people agreed with that. But the people that have been around chickens, and I've never grown up on a farm, but I can tell you right now, people do not want them. And I talk to people from all over Oregon. If I run into them, I know they're from Oregon, I get their opinion. It's not 100% what I want. And I know I wouldn't want my neighbors to have it. So out of 100 people, 106 people, that's a pretty good indicator on how people feel. And yes, some of the people on your streets, because we have a list of all the mailers that went out, that I know a lot of those people, and they just said no. I realize that. And I get a lot of calls too from people that if they would call the administration first, they would take care of it. But a lot of people don't want to call. So that's why I feel it's my job to voice the majority of the people I'm able to talk to. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, anybody else?
Mr. President?
Mr. Paula?
So we have, in the Book of Codified Ordinances, the chickens aren't meant for a residential area. There's a reason for that. I can't imagine having this many chickens in a small yard. They have to run, they have to walk around, they get exercise. How do they do that? So I agree, this is, to me, I really don't see the logic in any of this, so to speak. So that's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Paulo. Anybody else?
Mr. Horniak?
Mr. Wallen's.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. I have a question in regards to if the council so chooses to vote against the plan commission on this, what are the number of days the resident has to remove those chickens from their property?
Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor.
you could state that now. I would.
There's no set standard, hey, you got 30 days.
There isn't. They're literally you could say tomorrow they have to go.
Yeah.
But we've been always kind of compassionate, just like with the roosters. She was trying to relocate those to other people or whatnot. And she was given 30 days. I think that has been kind of a standard.
And that's what we've done with, when people have had excessive dogs,
Dogs or
we've given them time to find a home for them. So that's, I was wondering, you know, how we set that date. So thank you.
And I think that makes 30 days is probably been the standard. And because of the discussion, my guess is the applicant may have felt it was a decent chance of being able to get the 6 months. Remember, this expires in 6 months. So to say you got 5 days to get them out of there might be a little harsh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Rollins-Zach.
Mr.
Counsel.
President,
Mr. Reeves.
thank you. How many of these bantam chickens are there now?
You mean after the roosters have been,
Yeah, there's 30 left.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Mr. Mazur?
If the 8 were removed, there'd be 22 left, and that's, all indicators are that there's 22 left. If the roosters are
I don't think
removed.
that's the case.
I mean, I don't know a thing about chickens other than getting them at Kroger. I mean, there are bantam roosters?
Yeah.
That was
Yes.
considered with the 30 chickens?
That is the confusion because in the original application that she submitted to the Plan Commission, she indicated that there were 30 bantam chickens and did not identify any roosters in that group. Then
But are
at
there
the-
bantam roosters
Yes,
that,
sir. Yes. And at the hearing, she indicated that there were 8 roosters in it. And so I'm not sure if that's in addition to the 30 or if that was part of the 30. That was never clarified.
see, it's just so, it's so confusing on what they have there now or what they're, and correct me if I'm wrong. After the 6 months, there's gonna be nothing there?
That's correct. According to this SUE.
And they're not going to be able to bring any more there?
No.
Correct?
There'll be 0 there.
Her intent is to
There'll be
move
0 permitted.
from that location.
Okay. I just, like others have said here before me, I sure wouldn't want them living next door to me. And I mean, I live out here on Seaman here, not too far, where I have some space between the houses. I still wouldn't want them, there.
Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Counsel.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr. President.
Horniak.
Mr.
Thank
Rollins-Zach.
you, Mr. Horniak. And if you read on the conditions that were provided to us from the Plan Commission, it's actually 6 months from the day that the Plan Commission reviewed that. So you're really looking at 4.5 months moving forward. If it was to pass, 4.5 months that she would have remaining to remove the chickens, not 6 months, based on what we got from the Plan Commission.
That's correct.
Mr. President?
Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Rollins-Zach. Ms. Spaloff.
So if that's the case, where do you put 30 chickens on a small lot of property in a neighborhood in the wintertime where it gets below 0? What do you do with those chickens? Take them in the house, put them in the garage?
She has a coop on site, like a shed, for the chickens.
Is it heated? I mean,
I would assume so, yes, because that would be in violation of animal rights and such. But typically, every jurisdiction around has a limit of 6 in the municipality.
6 is one thing, but over 20 is, wow.
Over 6.
Thank you, Ms. Spaloff. Counsel, any further questions or comments? Okay, with that said, we will close the public hearing at 7:31. Council, we have this and one other agenda item that do need to be added to tonight's agenda. So I would ask for a motion to add item 160 of 2023 as
You
well.
don't have to.
You don't have to add
No,
that?
no, it's allocated through the planning commission. This was already on.
This is already on. Okay. My question was because it wasn't on the committee of the whole's agenda, whether
No,
we
no,
needed
it's
to
on.
move.
It's on.
So it is automatically placed
Yeah,
on based on
it
the
is.
planning commission. All right. Fair enough.
They set the public hearing, and you guys already set that public hearing for this date.
Fair enough. In that case, then, council, the item 160 of 2023 is before us. So we will present item 160 of 2023 and call it as ordinance 160 of 2023. And I'll ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing a special use permit for parcels 44-73431 and 44-73427 for property located at 2618 Bleecker Street, Oregon, Ohio, for the purpose of housing 30 Bantam chickens on the property in a R2 medium residential district.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Reeves.
I move for passage of ordinance 160 of 2023.
Second.
Thank you. So I have a motion by Mr. Reeves, second by Mr. Davish. Ms. Rawson, would you take a roll?
Mr. President, I would like to say something. My guess is you were moved for passage to vote no. And if you are, I would want to, if you would stipulate when you vote.
Okay.
That you give the time parameters that you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I move for passage of ordinance 160 of 2023 with a 30-day limit to remove all of the Bantam chickens.
If it fails.
I'm sorry?
If it fails.
If it fails.
I believe I understand. So, Mr. Reeves, your motion is for passage of ordinance 160 of 2023 with a contingent, if it does fail, that there is a 30-day exit of the chickens on premises.
Correct, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. So accepted.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Ms. Rawson, would you take a roll of council, please?
Mr. Reeves,
No.
Mr. Davish,
No.
Mr. Drake,
No.
Mr. Horniak,
No.
Mrs. Paula,
No.
Mr. Wallensack.
No.
Thank you, council. The motion or the ordinance is defeated by a vote of 6 nays and 0 yays. We'll move on to the next item for consideration. As we move into the agenda, we do have one item that's being presented to us today, which is item number 161 of 2023. We'll need a motion to move that to the agenda for this evening. Council?
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Pauloff. Item 161 of 2023 is added to tonight's agenda. That said, we'll move on to the items for passage this evening. The first item on there is item 154 of 2023, being presented by Mayor Mike Safarian and our Public Service Director, Paul Roman. Mr. Roman, we'll start with you.
Wait a minute. This was already discussed at the committee of the whole, so you asked for questions.
Okay. Any questions about 154 that we haven't discussed? None. I'm still going to ask for a high-level overview of this because not
Yeah,
everybody was there that might want to hear that.
And I appreciate the mayor's comment. I know sometimes with the media listening in, it's worth giving a recap. We did have a water and sewer committee last week to discuss this in detail. And there is a water rate and sewer evaluation that's included in the exhibit. There's also a rate comparison to 14 other utilities in Northwest Ohio included, but our rate increase is strictly really due to inflation, and it's to cover our operating expenses at the water treatment plant and for our water distribution system. And just in general, over the last 3 years, our even just chemical costs alone have almost doubled, and we now pay $675,000 more per year just for chemicals, and our water supplies have also gone up by 40%. And best way, really trying to explain to the public we have small increments over the next 4 years. And in the first year, the increases, our base rate is $19.35 per 1,000 cubic feet. That's gonna go up by $1.55 per 1,000. So on the minimum bill in 24, the minimum bill will go up by $2.32 a quarter, or 77 cents a month. The average bill will go up by $4.82 a quarter, or $1.61 a month. And then the following 3 years, we have smaller increments, similar increases. So in 25, the minimum bill will go up by $1.58 a quarter, or 53 cents a month. In 26, it'll go up by $1.65 a quarter, 55 cents a month. And then 27, it's $1.72 a quarter, 57 cents a month. In general, and in this exhibit, you'll find an area comparison to 14 other communities. Even after we make these increases, our 27 costs are still lower than everyone else's 23 costs, okay? Just want to make that clear. And these increases are really just to keep up with operating expenses. And we will provide a letter to all customers starting in January is when this would start, and we'll explain it of what they can expect over the next 4 years. As I said in the Water and Sewer Committee, next year at this time, we will have a capital improvement charge for the sanitary side, and that is to cover our expenses with the wastewater treatment plant, our current project. And a capital improvement charge goes on the bill to pay a loan, and once it's paid, it comes off the bill. But it'll still be viewed like an increase. And even at that time, if there's concerns for operating for sewer, and if it's something we need to consider, we can consider it at that time. I know comments at the Water and Sewer Committee meeting, possibly the concerns were, are we sure it's enough? And, these rates should be reviewed every year. I know through the EPA, a triennial review is required. But that doesn't mean you can't increase it if we see a higher inflation rate. But just like Mr. Mazur's earlier presentation for the budget, we're hoping interest rates level off and things will come back down, but they can always be adjusted again. And it's something you should do, and every utility company should be doing that. So, but beyond that, that's it. That's the recap. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor.
and I'd just like to expand on something Mr. Roman said. It translates into a rate increase for the water rates, but it's actually just a mathematical equation. Our enterprise account takes into account what it costs to produce the water divided amongst those people using it. Ours is kind of unique because we subsidize it with our payroll income tax. And Mr. Roman watches that revenue account, and when it starts to deplete, we need to put it at a level that keeps that as stable as possible. Otherwise, our subsidy isn't enough to cover the cost of the operation of the plant. And so, as you see it, technically it's a rate increase, but if we just have that mathematical equation, it's just the common sense of an enterprise account.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. Council, any questions? Any further comment? The one thing I would add is I do know that we vet this out pretty extensively, and I know it's a painstaking process to go through, and that we don't do this lightly. Through the committee meeting last week with the discussion that took place, the committee of the whole as well, and I know through a lot of individual conversations, the increase is warranted to maintain costs. And I think most all council members shared last week at the committee meeting that it's not only responsible, we think it's a conservative increase. And depending on inflationary rates and costs of chemicals, all those things, we will have to revisit this to make sure that we are keeping up with the charges, but it literally is just to operate our facilities and deliver the water. So I commend Mr. Roman and the administration because it takes a lot of work to put into this. It's a heavy consideration. We don't like raising them, but in this case, it makes perfect sense and conservatively so. So thank you to everybody for your work on that. That said, I will take item 154 of 2023 as ordinance 154 of 2023 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Ordinance amending section 943.01 water charges of the Oregon Municipal Code to increase water user base rates for the water treatment plant and water distribution system and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance 154 of 2023 as an emergency.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Davish, seconded by Mr. Drake. Ms. Rawson, would you take a roll vote of council?
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wollenzak?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries with 6 votes yes, 0 votes no. Next item for consideration on our agenda, council, which has been moved, all the rest of the items have been moved over, is item 155 of 2023, again presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Police Chief Brandon Began. You want to start with the chief? Chief, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mayor, Mr. President. This ordinance is for approval for the purchase of 4 year 2025 police interceptors from Bauman Ford Auto. The total price is just over $178,000. That includes a $28,750 trade-in value on 9 vehicles that have ended their life of service with our department and will be traded in.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Began. Council, any questions? This was discussed at our committee of the whole meeting last week. Are there any additional questions or comments tonight? Hearing none, I'll assign item number 155 of 2023 as ordinance 155 of 2023 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to issue a purchase order to Bauman Ford, Oregon, 2811 Navarre Avenue, Oregon, Ohio, for the purchase of 4 2025 Ford Interceptor utility all-wheel drive base vehicles to be used in the Oregon Police Division and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council,
Mr. President,
Mrs. Pauloff.
I move for passage of ordinance 155, 2023, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wollenzak. Ms. Rawson, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Wollenzak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries with 6 yes votes, 0 no votes. Next item for consideration is item 156 of 2023. Again, was discussed at our committee of the whole meeting last week. Council, are there any additional questions or comments? And this is basically outfitting the cars that we just approved. Any additional comments or questions on item 156? Nothing there? All right, then I will assign item 156 of 2023 as ordinance 156 of 2023 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to issue purchase order to DR Evil Police and Fire Equipment, 3203 Woodville Road, Northwood, Ohio, for the purchase of mobile data computers, or MDTs, and related equipment to be used in the Oregon Police Division and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council,
Mr. President,
Mrs. Pauloff.
I move for passage of ordinance 156 of 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wollenzak. Ms. Rawson, would you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Wollenzak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries with 6 yes votes, 0 no votes. Next on our agenda is item 157 of 2023. Again, this was discussed at our committee of the whole meeting last week. This is additional equipment into the vehicles. Chief, anything to add to that one?
Nothing to add. It's just for the in-car camera systems, 4 for the interceptors that we just spoke about, and 1 additional for the F-150 that we already have approved.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions on item 157? Hearing none, I'll assign item 157 of 2023 as ordinance 157 of 2023 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to issue a purchase order to Motorola Solutions, Inc., 1301 East Algonquin Road, Schaumburg, Illinois, for the purchase of in-car camera systems for the Oregon Police Division and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Pollock.
I move for passage of ordinance 157 of 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pollock.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenczak. Ms. Rawson, would you take a roll vote of council, please?
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carry or ordinance carries with 6 yes votes and 0 no votes. Next item on our agenda is item 158 of 2023. With this, again, we'll go to Chief Began to see if there's anything to add, again, discussed at our committee of the whole meeting last week.
There's nothing to add, Mr. President. This is just for the outfitting of the vehicles with all the new equipment and everything that's needed.
Very well. Council, any questions? Hearing none, I will assign item 158 of 2023 as ordinance 158 of 2023 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to issue a purchase order to DR Evil Police and Fire Equipment, 3203 Woodville Road, Northwood, Ohio, for the 2023 police vehicle equipment purchase and changeovers for the Oregon Police Division and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Pollock.
I move for passage of ordinance 158 of 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pollock.
Second.
Second by Mr. Drake. Ms. Rawson, would you take a roll vote of council, please?
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Thank you, council. Motion carries with 6 yes votes and 0 no votes. Next item on the agenda, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Finance Director Nick Roman, is item 159 of 2023. Mr. Roman, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is to renew an agreement with Standard Life Insurance Company through December 31st, 2025 at the same premium that we have paid since 2002.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Again, council, this was discussed at our committee of the whole meeting last week. Are there any comments or questions regarding this item? Hearing none, I will present item 159 of 2023 as ordinance 159 of 2023 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing and directing the mayor and the finance director to renew an agreement with the Standard Insurance Company to provide life insurance for City of Oregon employees.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for passage of ordinance number 159 of 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Ms. Rawson, would you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Thank you, council. Motion ordinance carries with a vote of 6 yes, 0 no votes. Next item for consideration on the agenda is 161 of 2023 being presented by Mayor Mike Safarian and Fire Chief Clayton O'Brien. Chief, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is brought to you for the purchase of 3 ventilators for our ambulances. These ventilators would be purchased out of our 235 EMS billing fund. They're the cost of $12,097 each. In the ordinances states just not to exceed $37,000 only due to the fact that we couldn't nail down the exact shipping cost. So we left a little buffer on what the cost of the actual ventilators were going to be compared to what the shipping will be. So it won't exceed the $37,000.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Mayor, administration, anything to add to that? No. Thank you. Council, any questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll assign item number 161 of 2023 as ordinance 161 of 2023 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to issue a purchase order to Zoll Medical Corporation, 269 Mill Road, Clemsford, MA, in an amount not to exceed $37,000, including freight, and 3 Z-Vent portable ventilators and required accessories to be used in the Oregon Fire Division and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. And council,
Mr. President,
Mrs. Paul.
I move for passage of ordinance 161 of 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Paulo. Second by Mr. Wallenzak. Ms. Rossen, would you take a roll count vote of council, please?
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Thank you, council. That concludes all the items on our agenda for this evening. We started with the mayor's report. Mayor, coming back to you, anything further to report this evening? All right, thank you very much, Mayor. Mr. Mazer.
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple items. Tarda's Business Open House is November 30th. That's this week from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. And that's in the St. Charles Hospital Boardroom. Also, Whitewater Car Wash's grand opening is tomorrow at 3 p.m. So everybody was invited to that as well, just as a reminder. Thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Mazer. Ms. Purpura, any report?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Purpura. Mr. Roman, any report?
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council members, will start with Mr. Reeves. Mr. Reeves, any report?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Drake?
No report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Wallenzak?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to rehab, we did have the Finance Committee meeting, the origin or the initial outline of the budget with recreation. Next week, I do need to plan or schedule another budget hearing for Monday, December 4th, 5:30 p.m. If it's going to be here or in chambers, I'm not sure. We'll try to figure out who's going to show up, who's not going to show up. But we will be talking safety services next week as part of our budget. That's all I have. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Wallenzak. Mr.
I
Davish?
have no report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Davish. Mrs. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. President. Nothing for my standing committee, but the holiday season in Oregon is well underway. And I want to remind everyone that this Saturday, December 2nd, is our Christmas tree lighting out front, and it starts at 5 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Paulo. And I have no report from my standing committee as well. I see by the sheet we have no one signed in under persons and delegations for this evening. So in that case, council, I would seek a motion to adjourn. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have one further item of business. I saw Ms. Rossen getting excited when I was passing that by. Council, the second regular meeting of December would be December 25th, obviously Christmas Day. I don't know that anybody else wants to be here any more than the rest of us. So the proposal is to move our second regular meeting of December to December 18th due to the Christmas holiday. And we would not have a committee of the whole meeting on December 18th due to this change. Is there any objection to making that change? The regular meeting is going to be moved to the 18th. So that would be the second regular meeting for the month of December. Okay? No objections. We'll set the schedule that way. Ms. Rossen, please update the city communications so that we represent that. That said, no other business being before council, I'll seek a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President.
Mr. Reeves.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Reeves, second by Mr. Davish. Any objection? Meeting's adjourned.